The Forgotten Hunter. The twin suns of Arcton V hung low in the sky, their fading light casting long shadows over a war-torn wasteland. The wind whispered through the skeletal remains of shattered warships, carrying with it the acrid scent of burnt metal and the faint echo of battles long past. Near the crumpled hull of a downed dreadnought, a figure lay still beneath a tangle of rusted debris. His breathing was shallow, his fur matted with dried blood and soot. Krav, an Arvak, a species bred by the ruthless Zelran Dominion for warfare, was left to die, forgotten on this desolate battlefield. Krav's mind drifted through fractured memories. He remembered the days when his pack stalked these grounds, their synchronized movements striking fear into even the most hardened enemies. His senses were sharper then, enhanced by the nanotech that coursed through his veins. The Zelran commanders would point, and Krav would lead his kin like shadows on the hunt, their claws and fangs leaving no survivors. But now, those days were gone. The war ended not with the triumphant howl of victory, but with the quiet signing of peace treaties. With no enemies left to conquer, the Dominion cast aside its warriors. The Arvak, once prized for their deadly efficiency, were abandoned like broken weapons. Krav had fought to stay with his pack as their ships left Arcton V, but his injuries slowed him. The last transport lifted off, and he was left behind, watching as the thrusters vanished into the clouds. Now hunger gnawed at his insides, and his enhanced muscles twitched from overuse. The nanites, which once healed his wounds, flickered sporadically. Without a command signal from his former masters, the technology was failing. As the cold crept in, Krav shifted, dragging himself toward the remnants of an old outpost. It was little more than twisted metal and rubble, but shelter was shelter. His movements were sluggish, the strength that once made him an apex predator draining by the second. By the time he reached the entrance, he could barely hold himself upright. His gaze lifted toward the sky, searching for something, anything, that might give him hope. But the heavens above were empty, save for the endless sprawl of stars. Krav's limbs trembled as he let out a low, mournful howl. It carried across the plains, a song of pain and betrayal, echoing through the ghostly corridors of the battlefield. As the sound faded, Krav collapsed, exhaustion pulling him under. He didn't know how long he lay there, drifting between the edge of life and death. Time seemed irrelevant in the quiet graveyard of war. But fate, as it often did, had other plans. A signal from the stars. Far above Arcton V, the Eos Intrepid drifted through the dark. The sleek, silver-hulled human vessel was part of the Galactic Exploration Fleet, a group that roamed the galaxy seeking to rebuild worlds shattered by the Dominion's conquests. Commander Elias Grant stood at the observation deck, his arms crossed as he watched the stars slip by. His dark eyes flicked over the red-tinted system maps, noting every dead world in this sector. "Commander, I'm picking up a faint reading," Lieutenant Harris called from the console. "Surface of Arcton V. It's weak, but definitely organic." Elias frowned. Arcton V was marked as uninhabitable after the war. No colony attempts had been made. Too much radiation, too many dangerous relics. "Could just be residual signatures," Elias replied. Harris shook his head. "No, sir. This one's moving. Barely, but there's life down there." The commander's gaze narrowed. "Prepare a shuttle. I want a closer look." The Intrepid descended through the planet's turbulent atmosphere, its engines humming softly as it skimmed over the ruins below. Through the forward viewport, Elias could see the scorched plains stretching endlessly beneath them. War had left its scars deeply carved into the planet's surface. As the scanners honed in on the signal, a single pulse appeared on the screen, a faint heartbeat amidst the chaos. The landing party stepped onto the ground cautiously, their boots crunching against the ashen soil. Elias led the group, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma sidearm. They followed the signal through the ruins, each step revealing more of the planet's grim history. Burned-out tanks, twisted mechs, and shattered fortifications lay half buried in the earth. Then, amidst the rust and ruin, they saw him. Krav lay beneath a collapsed section of hull plating, his chest rising and falling with labored effort. His once proud fur was caked with grime. But even now, the Arvak's size and stature were formidable. Elias's instincts screamed danger. Arvak were known killers, used by the Dominion to decimate entire squads of soldiers. But as he looked closer, he realized there was no aggression left in this creature, only exhaustion and pain. Dr. Layla Monroe, the team's medic, knelt beside Krav, running a scanner over his body. "He's dying," she whispered. "Severe malnutrition, multiple fractures. His nanotech's offline." Elias sighed. The smart thing to do was to leave him here. Arvak were dangerous, unpredictable. But something about Krav's condition tugged at the edges of Elias's thoughts. A creature bred for war, left behind by those who created him. Wasn't that humanity's story once too? Elias knelt, meeting Krav's half-lidded gaze. "Let's get him aboard," Elias ordered. "He deserves more than to die out here." And so, fate shifted for Krav. In the ashes of war, humanity extended a hand to a forgotten hunter, unaware that the bond forged this day would echo across the stars. The awakening of the war dog. Krav's eyes opened slowly, met by a sterile glow that he didn't recognize. The faint hum of machinery thrummed around him, and the air smelled clean, too clean. He was no longer on Arcton V. Panic surged in his chest, his instincts snapping to life. With a low growl, Krav tried to rise, but a sharp pain shot through his body, forcing him back down. He bared his fangs, ready to fight, but his limbs felt like lead. "Easy," a calm voice said nearby. Krav's eyes darted to the side, locking onto a figure seated near the edge of the room. A human. Commander Elias Grant sat with his hands resting loosely on his knees, watching Krav carefully. His posture wasn't threatening, but Krav knew better than to trust appearances. "You're safe," Elias said. "We're aboard the EO's Intrepid. We found you on the surface of Arcton V." Krav didn't respond. He didn't trust words, especially not from humans. The Zelwan Dominion had painted them as the enemy for years. Fragile, greedy creatures who relied on machines rather than strength. They were prey to the Dominion's hunters. Yet here he was, lying on their ship. Dr. Layla Monroe stepped into Krav's field of vision, her handheld scanner flickering as she checked his vitals. The glow of the screen reflected softly in her dark eyes. "He's stabilizing," she reported, directing her words to Elias but keeping her gaze on Krav. "Though his nanotech is shot, it's not responding to external stimulation." Elias exhaled through his nose. "Figures. The Dominion builds things to last until they're not needed." Krav twitched at that. It was true. He had been designed to fight and kill, nothing more. Now, without the Dominion's oversight, his body was breaking down. But why had the humans brought him here? "You didn't leave me," Krav finally rasped, his voice rough from disuse. Elias met his gaze without flinching. "No, we didn't." Krav stared at him for a long moment, searching for deception. The humans had nothing to gain from saving him. Arvak were predators, the enemy's weapons of war. Any logical commander would have left him to die. "And yet, you are foolish," Krav growled. Elias allowed a small smirk. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Dr. Monroe lowered her scanner and knelt beside Krav's cot, her expression softening. "We couldn't just leave you there. You were dying." Krav turned his head away, unsure how to process the strange warmth that settled in his chest. The Dominion had never shown him such mercy. Weakness wasn't tolerated among the Arvak. If one of his packmates fell, they were left behind. But humans were different. A new pack. Over the next few days, Krav's strength gradually returned, though his nanotech remained dormant. His body, enhanced or not, was resilient. He explored the ship in silence, shadowing Elias and his crew as they moved about their duties. The humans watched him cautiously, but didn't interfere. Even the lower-ranked crew members, who clearly feared him, kept their distance without hostility. Krav wasn't sure what to make of it. In the Dominion, strength ruled. Respect was earned through dominance, and loyalty was enforced by fear. But here, aboard the Intrepid, respect flowed without demand. The crew deferred to Elias not because they feared him, but because they trusted him. Krav didn't understand this kind of bond. It wasn't long before the Intrepid received its next mission, an aid relief assignment to a war-ravaged colony. Krav listened quietly as Elias briefed his crew in the command chamber. Pirates have been raiding supply convoys headed to Callan's Reach, Elias explained, pulling up a star map. We've been tasked with escorting the next shipment. Krav's ears perked at that. He recognized the names. The Dominion had crushed Callan's Reach during the war. Its people barely survived the occupation. Elias's eyes flicked toward Krav, as if sensing his thoughts. You can stay here if you want, Elias offered. You're not obligated to join us. Krav narrowed his gaze. Is this a test? Krav asked, suspicion lingering in his tone. Elias shook his head. No test. You've been through enough of those. Krav stared for a moment before rising to his feet. I will fight. Elias raised an eyebrow. Why? Krav met his gaze without hesitation. The pack fights together. Elias smiled faintly, though he didn't comment. The Callan's Reach incident. The journey to Callan's Reach was uneventful at first. The Intrepid slipped through the edges of Zelran-controlled space, keeping to unmarked trade lanes. Krav stood beside Elias on the bridge, watching the void through the observation glass. But peace never lasted long. The first shots came from the darkness, bright lances of energy arcing toward the convoy. Pirate vessels approaching. Lieutenant Harris shouted from his station. Elias didn't hesitate. All hands to battle stations. Krav, with me. Krav's claws flexed involuntarily, his muscles coiling with anticipation. As the crew scrambled, Krav followed Elias to the docking bay, where the assault teams were suiting up. Krav's sharp gaze fell on the armor and rifles being distributed. He had no weapon, no armor. Elias glanced at him knowingly. I figured you wouldn't need one. Krav let out a low predatory growl. The pirates never stood a chance. Krav moved like a shadow, his claws tearing through hull plating and flesh alike. The war dog had been unleashed once more, but this time, he wasn't fighting for the Dominion. He fought for the humans who saved him. The hunt in the void. The pirate vessel Black Harbinger drifted lifelessly in the dark expanse of space, its once operational engines flickering in defeat. Hull breaches glowed faintly along its surface, small fires licking out into the vacuum before being snuffed by the cold abyss. Krav stood at the edge of the Intrepid's airlock, his sharp eyes narrowing as the docking tube hissed and sealed against the pirate ship's damaged exterior. Behind him, the human assault team loaded their rifles and checked their armor seals, moving with precision. Commander Elias Grant stood at Krav's side, gripping his plasma rifle with quiet confidence. You sure you want to lead this charge? Elias asked, tilting his head toward Krav. The Arvik's ears twitched slightly, his gaze never leaving the door. This ship is prey, Krav growled. And I am the hunter. Elias smirked faintly. Just don't break too much. We need to bring some of them back for questioning. Krav let out a low, rumbling chuckle, a sound that felt foreign to his own ears. There was something strange about fighting alongside humans. It wasn't the same as leading his old Arvak pack. It lacked the rigid hierarchy and brutal efficiency the Zelran Dominion demanded. But there was freedom in it. The lights above the airlock turned green, and the outer hatch of the Black Harbinger groaned open. The humans hesitated, but Krav didn't. He moved with silent, predatory grace, disappearing into the shadows of the pirate ship's corridor before the rest of the team even stepped inside. His senses stretched out, detecting the faint hum of life deeper within. The smell of fear. Krav stalked through the dim corridors, the flickering lights reflecting off the walls like the failing heartbeat of a wounded beast. The scent of sweat and metal filled his nostrils. He could hear them, the pirates, scrambling deeper into the ship, their hurried footsteps echoing through the vents. They had seen him in the earlier skirmish. The stories of Arvak war beasts hadn't faded with time. Krav's claws flexed against the metal floor. Good. Let them fear. He rounded a corner, his keen eyesight catching movement ahead. A pirate in light body armor stumbled down the hall, his plasma pistol shaking in his hand. Krav didn't wait. He pounced, his massive frame striking the man like a cannon blast. The pirate's weapon clattered to the ground as Krav pinned him against the wall, sharp fangs mere inches from his throat. "Till you wait," the man stammered, his eyes wide with terror. Krav's snarl silenced him instantly. Behind Krav, Elias and his team approached, their footsteps measured but unhurried. "Leave him," Elias ordered, lowering his rifle. "He's not important." Krav's eyes remained locked on the trembling pirate for a few long seconds before he released his grip. The man collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. "Run," Krav growled. "And tell the others who hunts them now." The pirate didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled down the corridor, disappearing around the next bend. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You enjoy this too much." Krav's lip curled slightly in amusement. "Hunting is survival. Your enemies must know fear." Elias chuckled under his breath. "I think they're getting the message loud and clear." Deeper into the beast, the assault team advanced further into the ship, clearing each room with practiced efficiency. But Krav could feel it, something larger lurking ahead. Near the engineering bay, he caught the scent. A stronger presence. Krav's muscles tensed instinctively. This was no ordinary pirate. As they entered the chamber, they found him. A towering figure clad in heavy armor, standing near the reactor core. His scared face twisted into a snarl at the sight of Krav. "You brought an Arvak on board," the pirate captain growled, his voice deep and gravelly. "That's a mistake." Elias stepped forward calmly. "I'd say it's working out just fine." Krav didn't wait for orders. The moment the pirate captain reached for his weapon, Krav lunged. The fight was swift but brutal. Plasma bolts seared the air as Krav darted beneath the captain's swinging arm. His claws raked across the armored plating, sparks flying. The pirate struck back, his massive gauntlet slamming into Krav's side. Krav staggered but didn't fall. His eyes blazed with renewed fury. With a snarl, he surged forward, tackling the captain to the ground. Krav's jaws closed around the man's armored forearm, the servos whining under the pressure until they buckled. The pirate roared in pain, but Krav was relentless. It ended with the pirate's armor cracked open, and Krav standing over him, breathing heavily. Elias stepped beside Krav, gazing down at the battered captain. "Looks like you're not as tough as you thought," Elias remarked. The pirate groaned, unable to respond. Krav stepped back, allowing Elias's team to secure the prisoner. A predator's reflection. Back aboard the Intrepid, Krav stood at the observation deck, staring out into the void. The battle had been short, but something about it lingered in his mind. For the first time in cycles, he felt a strange sense of fulfillment. Not the hollow satisfaction of serving the Dominion, but something deeper, something closer to belonging. He glanced toward Elias, who stood a few feet away, arms crossed as he watched the stars. "You fight differently than the Dominion," Krav said after a moment. Elias turned slightly, his brow raising. "How so?" "You do not fight to dominate. You fight to protect." Elias smiled faintly. "That's the idea." Krav was silent for a long time, his gaze returning to the stars. Perhaps the humans weren't as weak as the Dominion claimed. Perhaps they were stronger than anyone realized. Brotherhood forged in battle. The silence of space felt heavier after a fight. The Black Harbinger's wreckage drifted behind the Eos Intrepid like a gutted carcass left to the void, and the surviving pirates were secured in the ship's brig. But Krav found no peace in victory. He paced the length of the Intrepid's cargo bay, his claws clicking softly against the steel deck. The lingering scent of battle still clung to him. Burnt circuits, blood, and adrenaline. He couldn't shake the sensation of the pirate captain's armor giving way beneath his jaws. That had felt good. But why? You're restless. Krav turned sharply to see Elias leaning against a nearby crate, arms crossed, watching him with quiet amusement. The commander's sharp gaze seemed to pierce through Krav's facade. I do not sit idle after a hunt, Krav growled. In my pack, there was always another target, another enemy. Elias pushed off the crate and stepped closer, the soft hum of the ship's engines vibrating beneath their feet. You're not with the Dominion anymore. You don't have to keep fighting to prove yourself. Krav's eyes narrowed. Prove myself. Elias met his gaze evenly. I've seen how the Dominion works. You Arvak, you're tools to them. Weapons to be sharpened until they break. But here, you're more than that. Krav's ears flicked, uncertainty settling in his chest. He was no stranger to war. But this was different. I was made for war, Krav muttered, his gaze drifting toward the viewport overlooking the starfield. Without it, what am I? Elias was quiet for a long moment before stepping beside him. Maybe that's for you to decide. You've earned the right to choose. The words sat heavily on Krav's shoulders. The Dominion never gave him choices. They gave him orders. A call from the Reach. The conversation was cut short by the sharp chime of the comm system. Lieutenant Harris's voice crackled over the intercom. Commander, incoming distress signal from Callan's Reach. Elias's expression darkened as he tapped his communicator. Patch it through. The bridge flickered to life on the nearby holoscreen, displaying the shaky image of Governor Thane, the leader of Callan's Reach. His weathered face bore deep lines of stress. Commander Grant, Thane said, his voice laced with urgency. We've got trouble. Another pirate fleet just entered the system, larger than before. They're targeting our supply lines. We don't have the ships to fend them off. Elias's jaw tightened. We'll be there in 6 hours. Thank you, Thane replied. But hurry, Commander. I fear we won't last that long. The screen blinked out, leaving the cargo bay in silence. Elias wasted no time. He turned to Krav. You said you wanted another hunt. Krav's eyes gleamed, his claws flexing. I will fight. Descent into chaos. The Intrepid dropped out of hyperspace just beyond Callan's Reach, where flashes of light illuminated the blackness of space. The pirate fleet hung like vultures over the colony, their weapons hammering at the fragile defense platforms orbiting the planet below. Shields up, full burn toward the lead vessel, Elias ordered, his voice cold and precise. Krav stood behind him, staring at the tactical display with keen interest. His eyes locked onto the largest ship at the heart of the pirate fleet, a sprawling dreadnought bristling with cannons. That one, Krav growled. I will board it. Elias turned, raising an eyebrow. That ship's twice the size of the Intrepid. You sure about this? Krav's gaze didn't waver. I do not hesitate. Elias's smirk returned. All right. Let's make it happen. The leap of the hunter. The assault shuttle sliced through the void, weaving between volleys of plasma fire as it closed the distance to the pirate dreadnought. Inside, Krav crouched near the hull breach doors, ready to leap the moment they made contact. You sure you don't want backup? Harris asked nervously from the pilot's seat. Krav shook his head. They are not prepared for me. The shuttle slammed against the dreadnought's outer hull, magnetic clamps engaging with a deep thud. The doors hissed open, and Krav leaped forward, landing with a heavy crash inside the enemy ship. Blaster fire erupted around him, but Krav moved like a shadow, darting through the corridor with savage precision. His claws ripped through the first pirate before the others could react. The second fell moments later, his weapon clattering to the floor. Krav felt the rush of battle course through his veins, but something was different this time. He wasn't fighting to survive or prove his dominance. He was fighting for something greater, something he couldn't quite define. The heart of the storm. As Krav carved his way toward the dreadnought's bridge, the pirate captain appeared once more, this one larger and better armed than the last. "You again?" The pirate sneered, hefting a plasma axe. "I thought we killed your kind off after the war." Krav bared his teeth. "You were mistaken." The two clashed, the narrow corridor filling with the echoes of snarling and the hum of energy weapons. Sparks rained down as Krav's claws met steel, and the deck trembled beneath their ferocity. In the end, Krav stood victorious, his breath ragged but unbroken. The dreadnought's crew scattered as he seized the bridge controls, overriding the weapons systems with brutal efficiency. Outside, the pirate fleet's formation crumbled as the dreadnought's cannons turned inward, unleashing a hailstorm on its own ships. By the time the Intrepid arrived, the battle was already won. A new path. As Krav returned to the Intrepid, Elias greeted him with a rare nod of approval. "You took out their flagship by yourself," Elias said. "I'd say you earned your place here." Krav regarded him quietly before speaking. "Perhaps there is more to this pact than I thought." Elias chuckled. "Stick around. We're just getting started." And for the first time, Krav believed him. The fire beneath the ice. The stars drifted lazily beyond the viewport as the Eos Intrepid sailed away from Callan's reach, victorious yet scared. The battle was over, but Krav's mind still lingered on the echoes of combat. The scent of scorched metal, the thrum of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The humans celebrated their victory in quiet camaraderie, gathering in the mess hall to share laughter and stories. Krav remained outside, perched near the observation deck, like a silent sentinel, his golden eyes reflecting the starlight. Peace felt alien to him. It gnawed at the edges of his instincts, whispering that danger could return at any moment. Elias approached, standing beside him without speaking for a long while. "You know," Elias said finally, breaking the silence, "you don't have to keep standing watch. We're in safe space now." Krav's ears flicked, but his gaze didn't shift. Safe does not exist. Even the stars can burn. Elias smirked faintly, spoken like someone who's seen too many battles. Krav turned to face him, the sharp glint in his eye fading slightly. "You did not grow up in the Dominion, Commander. You do not know what it means to be prey and predator at the same time." Elias's expression darkened, the weight of his own past surfacing for a fleeting moment. "Maybe not in the same way," he admitted, "but humans know what it's like to fight for survival. We built our place in the galaxy claw by claw. Sometimes the difference between prey and predator is just perspective." Krav studied him carefully, the words settling in his chest like stones. Ghosts of the past. Later that night, Krav's restless nature led him to the engineering bay, where the soft hum of machinery provided some measure of calm. He found Dr. Layla Monroe kneeling beside a disassembled drone, her hands deftly reconnecting circuits. She glanced up as Krav's towering form approached. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world to find a genetically engineered war beast prowling the lower decks. "I do not require sleep often," Krav replied. He paused, tilting his head. "You are repairing this." Layla smiled faintly. "Trying to. It's not just about fixing things. It's about keeping the ship running, making sure we survive the next encounter." Krav crouched beside her, his claws tapping gently on the floor. In the Dominion, broken things were discarded. There was no place for weakness. Layla nodded, carefully fitting a component back into place. "Humans are different. We fix things. We believe even the broken can be useful again." Krav's gaze lingered on the drone. The human's way of thinking, of repairing instead of discarding, felt strange, but intriguing. His thoughts were interrupted by the sharp chime of the comm system. A faint signal. "Commander Grant to the bridge." Elias's voice over the intercom held a sharp edge that immediately caught Krav's attention. He exchanged a glance with Layla before rising to his full height and striding toward the lift. When Krav arrived at the bridge, Elias and Lieutenant Harris were hunched over the console, their faces grim. "What is it?" Krav asked, his eyes narrowing. Harris gestured toward the main screen, where a faint signal pulsed intermittently against the black void. "It's an emergency beacon, but it's Dominion tech." Krav's fur bristled. The Dominion rarely used distress beacons. When they did, it meant something had gone terribly wrong. Elias crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on the screen. "It's weak. Could be a trap. Or it could be someone left behind." Krav growled softly. Elias glanced at him, considering the words carefully. After a moment, he nodded. "Plot a course. Let's find out." The forgotten ship. The Intrepid followed the beacon across the desolate expanse of deep space until the signal led them to the remnants of a Dominion warship drifting silently among the asteroids. Its hull bore deep scars, and the faint glow of emergency lights flickered weakly along its spine. Elias stood at the viewport, arms behind his back. Harris scanned for life signs. A tense pause followed. "There's one. Faint, but it's there," Harris confirmed. Elias exhaled, his breath fogging slightly against the cold glass. "Prepare a boarding team." Krav didn't wait for orders. He was already moving toward the airlock, his claws itching with anticipation. Shadows of the Dominion. The interior of the Dominion vessel was eerily quiet. Krav stepped through the breached airlock first, his senses stretching into the dark corridors. The cold staleness of the ship felt suffocating, empty, yet haunted by echoes of its past. Krav remembered ships like this. He had served aboard many, obeying commands without question. But this time, he walked freely. Elias and Layla followed closely behind, their rifles at the ready. As they advanced toward the source of the life sign, Krav caught the scent. Faint, but unmistakable. Arvak. A low growl rumbled in his chest. They found him collapsed near the engine room. Another Arvak, smaller than Krav, with jet-black fur and a fresh scar across his eye. His breathing was shallow, and his limbs twitched as if caught in the throes of fever. Layla knelt beside him instantly. "He's in bad shape. We need to get him to the Intrepid." Krav crouched beside the fallen Arvak, his gaze softening for the first time. "You know him?" Elias asked quietly. Krav nodded. "He was in my pack. His name is Jorik." Elias placed a hand on Krav's shoulder. "We'll take him home." As they carried Jorik back to the Intrepid, Krav's thoughts lingered. Perhaps the Dominion thought they could discard their soldiers, but humanity had shown him something the Dominion never could. Hope. And for the first time, Krav felt that hope burning deep within his chest, like fire beneath the ice. The price of loyalty. The Eos Intrepid drifted through the quiet expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it made its way to the nearest medical station. Inside, the crew moved with their usual rhythm, the aftermath of their recent encounter with the Dominion warship still weighing heavily on their minds. The rescue of Jorik had been a success, but the discovery of another Arvak left Krav with more questions than answers. He had been alone for so long, a lone warrior without purpose, only to find that his old pack, his old life, wasn't as distant as he had thought. But in his heart, there was something more troubling. Krav paced the corridors of the ship, his mind swirling with conflicting emotions. He had been raised to fight, to dominate. His very existence was crafted to serve the Dominion's insatiable hunger for conquest. Yet, ever since coming aboard the Intrepid, something inside him had shifted. He had fought beside humans, beings he was bred to destroy. And for the first time, he felt connected. It unsettled him. Revelations from the past. The medical bay was quieter than usual when Krav entered, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the sterile room. Layla Monroe sat by Jorik's side, monitoring his vitals as the young Arvak's chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. The human medic had done everything she could, but Jorik's body had been broken in too many ways. The damage was deep, the nanotech that had once sustained him faltering as it had with Krav. It would take weeks, perhaps months, to repair him fully. Krav stood at the edge of the bed, his golden eyes fixed on Jorik's unconscious form. He knew Viz Arvak. He had fought alongside him in countless campaigns, but now Jorik was no more than a shell, a remnant of the war. "I've done what I can," Layla said quietly, noticing Krav's presence. "But he needs time. His nanotech, it's deteriorating at a much faster rate than yours did." Krav nodded, but the words felt heavy. "The Dominion used us until we were no longer useful." Layla looked up at him, her expression softening. "That's not how we do things here, Krav." Krav turned away, his mind swirling. The more he thought about it, the more he realized just how much the Dominion had twisted him. He had been bred to follow orders, to obey without question, to kill without remorse. The Intrepid's crew had offered him something else, something human, compassion, understanding, even a glimmer of hope. But what did that mean for him? "Jorik was loyal to the Dominion," Krav muttered. "But what do we do when there is nothing left to fight for?" Layla didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed a hand on Krav's shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "You choose, Krav. You choose what your loyalty means. The past doesn't define who you are now." Krav stood silent, her words sinking in like a weight on his chest. Was that true? Could he really choose his own path after everything he had been through? The enemy within. Krav's moment of contemplation was broken by the sharp chime of the ship's intercom. "Commander Grant to the bridge. All crew to your stations." Elias's voice was commanding, but it carried an undertone of urgency. Krav turned toward the door. "I'll be back," he said to Layla, though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to explain himself. The moment he stepped onto the bridge, the atmosphere shifted. The crew was tense, scanning the incoming data with focused intensity. Elias stood by the main console, his brow furrowed as he looked over the ship's sensors. "What's going on?" Krav asked, his voice low. "There's another signal," Elias said, his eyes locked on the screen. "A fleet moving toward a nearby colony. And this one's not just pirates. It's Dominion." The weight of the name hit Krav like a physical blow. The Dominion had always been his enemy. He had been bred to fight and kill for them. But the human crew of the Intrepid had become something different, a family, a pack. "I can't believe it," Elias continued. "The Dominion's forces are scattered, but they're not gone. They're regrouping, and it looks like they've set their sights on a vulnerable colony." Krav's gaze shifted to the star map on the screen, where a small planet flickered in the vastness of space. The colony, unprotected, was about to be attacked by the very force that had abandoned him. "I'll go," Krav said, his voice firm. Elias looked at him with a mixture of concern and understanding. "Are you sure? We could try to avoid them, wait them out." "No," Krav growled. "I owe it to them, to you, to myself." Elias met his gaze for a moment, and then with a nod, he issued the order. "Set a course. Full speed ahead." The calm before the storm. The journey to the colony felt long, the weight of Krav's decision pressing down on him like a shadow. The closer they got to the Dominion fleet, the more his instincts screamed at him. The war, the violence, the bloodshed. It all rushed back in waves. He stood at the observation deck again, staring out into the void. The stars were cold, distant. But in that distance, something else called to him. Something stronger than his past, something that had been growing ever since he first stepped aboard the Intrepid. Elias approached quietly, standing beside Krav without a word. The two of them looked out at the fleet approaching the colony. "They don't know what's coming," Elias murmured. Krav's voice was low, but it held a quiet fury. "They will. We'll show them that not everything can be conquered." Elias looked at Krav, his gaze steady. "You've changed." "I have," Krav replied, a deep growl of resolve creeping into his voice. "And I will continue to change. I will fight for them now. For you." The words were more than just an admission. They were a declaration. Krav had found something in the humans aboard the Intrepid that he had never had in the Dominion, something stronger than fear or loyalty to a cause. He had found a new purpose, one born from choice, not from a past forced upon him. And he would defend it, no matter the cost. The battle for the colony. As the Intrepid dropped out of warp near the colony, Krav was the first to board the assault shuttle, his claws digging into the metal as he prepared for what would come next. His heart thundered in his chest, not with fear, but with anticipation. The Dominion's fleet waited on the other side of the colony's defense line. But this time, Krav would be the one to show them what true strength was. The shuttle doors slammed open as it made contact with the enemy ships, and Krav's primal instincts kicked into overdrive. His claws tore through the enemy's hull with ease, his fury an unstoppable force. The Dominion soldiers never knew what hit them. And this time, Krav wasn't fighting alone.